let's trace this out slowly
Yeah.
because it's really important what you're saying, and it's not quite as rudimentary as conservatives that listen to conservative mainstreams are taught to believe. The
Right.
progression of the systemic um I don't know. I'm trying to think of exactly what it is. Devolution. Let's just call it a systemic devolution that
Yeah.
stems into modernity, through modernity into postmodernity. Ultimately, we're going to say, I think you and I will say the solution is something like the perennial philosophy channeled through the narrative voice of Tolkien. I think is something like the white pill here.
Yeah.
That's seems to be your claim, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
But
That's
I want to go through the devolution with you because
sure.
you mentioned some ideas that told me like a tuning fork you get,
Right.
and mentioning Bacon and Descartes together as kind of the two figureheads of the Enlightenment
Mhm.
shows that one gets it for a specific reason. I'll explain in a second, but let's walk through this together. So first off,
Mhm.
in the 16th century, we have the Protestant Enlightenment, which uncouples Christianity from the natural law. This is most specific. It also desacralized Christianity. It pitched a desacralized Christianity, a Christianity that doesn't have the sacraments, but
Mhm.
and that's a kind of supernatural uncoupling. But the uncoupling of Christians from the world via the divorce of the Christian mind from the natural law was, I think, the most pernicious element here. And it led the way, it paved the way by about 100 years um, to what's called the Enlightenment. And in my book, Catholic Republic, I trace this. I say,
Mhm.
look, Protestant Reformation in the 16th century and the Enlightenment, figureheaded by Bacon and Descartes in the 17th century, each stand for three propositions: the uncoupling of Western civilization from three things, right? And it's basically the three things are all attributions of nature. Christianity, for 1500 years, viewed nature as moral, as a moral forum, as an intelligible forum that we can
Mhm.
learn from and about, and as a teleological forum, a
Right.
place where nature communicates these three big principles. They're all natural law interactions with natural reason of one thing, like a lightning rod. The human intellect can learn from and about nature and their moral principles, and they have a moral goal. That's those 3 points in one. Nature is a moral forum, even though you look at nature, you watch Discovery Channel and nature is red and tooth and claw. It's a place where human beings, human nature, is still set to thrive, even though animals kill each other and pretty much just have sex nonstop. Human beings are different. Don't ask the red pill guys, but human beings are different. We are
Yeah.
wired to be moral. And that's because of point number two: the world around us we can learn from and about. And what we mainly learn is that our main task here, besides seeking reunification with Jesus, is to be moral. And then thirdly, we learn that our main task is actually the very goal, the centerpiece, teleologically speaking, of human existence, to be good. So nature is um, a moral forum that is intelligible. We can learn about it. And teleological, we are oriented to something, as the idea fixae of history. These are the three ideas that were first rejected in the 16th century by Protestantism. They were later rejected in a false dialectic, a false dichotomy by the Enlightenment. And what I do in my book is I say, okay, Protestantism and Protestant reformers in the 16th century are the intellectual grandparentage of what today is called in America, which is very confused, the religious right. The religious right rejects those three prongs about nature for ostensibly opposite reasons from the intellectual grandparents of the Enlightenment, who are called in Americans' discourse today the secular left. They think they're opposites, but each of the three of them reject those three prongs of nature as moral, intelligible, teleological for ostensibly different reasons, but they reject them all the same. Protestants reject nature as a moral place because they say, tulip Calvinism, right? It's an irredeemably evil place. Irredeemable. There's no real possibility of natural Aristotelian virtue. The Enlightenment rejects it because they say there's no such thing as morality, right? The secular left person will tell you, well, there is no morality. A true Protestant, a Calvinist, will tell you, well, it's wicked, it's abominable. Now, prong number two is rejected by 16th century religious right grandparentage, the Protestant reformers. Nature as intelligible, they'll tell you, no, sola scriptura, only really the supernatural words of Scripture are intelligible ultimately. Nothing else can be made any mince of. You get this really clearly and honestly intoned by Karl Barth, who said, natural theology is from the devil. You can't learn from the book of nature. You can only learn from the book of Scripture. St. Augustine was wrong. Enlightenment will say, well, the universe isn't really intelligible. And this is where Bacon and Descartes are particularly important, because whether or not you're an empiricist or a rationalist, there really is no is there. There's no intelligibility that isn't just data numbers, like in the Matrix. There's no such thing as intelligibility. And of course, for Protestants, they kind of agree on prong three with us Catholic Christians, that there is a purpose to the universe, which is unification with Jesus, but it's not coupled to prongs 2 and 1, being naturally moral or naturally wired to using our intellects toward the intelligible, which is the outside world.
So, well, they did away with the outside world. They did away with that right off the bat right out of the gate with Bacon when he wrote the Nouveau Organum, his new organon, to replace Aristotle's organon, this basic treatise of logic. He did away with metaphysics. He returned us. Really the big grab in the Reformation was they grabbed academia. They grabbed academia there, and they turned the mind of humanity. They turned the West's mind downward toward the earth, and they did away with the if we can't touch it, smell it, taste it, feel it, hear it, it's not there in their materialism. They turned all of creation into a machine to be exploited. That was their whole goal. Now their whole goal wasn't to join with God for eternity. Their goal was to create wealth and pleasure and eternal kind of a secular or a serial lifespan here on earth. And it's at the root of everything. And it's part of this dualistic idea where you pull something apart and then it's divide and conquer. And the first thing they did was divide the human being from the substantial unity to this dualism. And then conquering was very easy. Descartes and Bacon, not in that order, Bacon and Descartes they led the vanguard of the quote unquote Enlightenment. But you mentioned the divorce before, and that was really, and it's pointed out in our book, that was really the work of Pierre Bayle, the French skeptic, extremely potent, very, very critical, and he's described in his part is in our book. And it was burn everything down. So you lead with the vanguard of this new idea, and now it's about the material world, and then you burn everything down behind you. And we're doing that now in our own culture. That's why we're all this revisionist history, and then the Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power, the Rings of Power by Amazon is a perfect example of that. Burn down what we thought, our memory, destroy our idea of what something is, and you can't remember it anymore, and it's not powerful anymore. Human beings live and die by ideas and stories. And when those ideas and concepts, ideas and stories are warped, we're warped as people. And that's exactly what's going on. We've got this new idea, this whole woke ideology rooted in Marxism and Darwinism. And then we've got burn everything down behind us. And particularly in young people, they don't have a chance. I mean, and without real firm, strong parenting, not the teachers, real strong parenting, they don't have a chance. They can't see what's going on, and they become extremely vulnerable to what we see going on right now, even to the point of mutilating themselves.